everybody, and welcome to EduSpots World Teachers Day EduChamps Talk, which brings together an exciting mix of panelists to discuss the theme of global voices, future focus in celebration of teachers all across the world. So I'm about to hand over to Gertrude, who is going to talk us through the format of the event, alongside a bit of background information on EduSpots.
Hi, everyone. Good day, wherever you're watching from. My name is Getrude Akunlibe. I'm the Northern and Overseas Regional Coordinator. For today, we'll be looking at a big background on EduSpots, the reason that we have this opportunity to be here. And I'll do a bit of introduction of our guests, then we go into our panel discussion, and then we'll follow up by opening the room to audience to ask questions, and then we can wrap up from there. Right, so about EduSpots, who are we? We are a Ghana, UK charity that exists to connect catalysts, local catalysts in igniting future-ready change in their communities. So we have a network of catalysts who set up what we call educational spaces called spots in their communities, and they run various strands based on the needs and priorities of the communities, ranging from educate, ecosystem, ignite, equity, and so on. And at the heart of what they're keeping sport safe and sport leadership. Keeping sport safe ensures that systems in place to be safe, both the children, the learner, anybody involved in our work. And we also have our sport leadership strand, which primarily is about advancing the professional development of the teams involved, ensuring that they create the change they want in their community. And throughout this process, the output most of the time ranges from beyond and so many so forth. And so you would see in our next slide, just as an example, a confirmation from one of our catalysts in Agbledomi number 4, where he speaks to the fact that before the existence of our sports in their community, most of the children could not even access the internet or even know more about the internet, speaking of typing letters. And I also speak as somebody who started as a catalyst and have been for the last 5 years, that just last year, we're doing a STEM camp in my local community, Dolgo. And as at the start of the camp, out of 20 girls, just one of the girls could turn on a laptop, just to give you a sense of the communities we are working with. But of course, at the end of the training, we had all the girls going beyond owning to using PowerPoint, Microsoft Word, learning about online safety. So it's been a 10 years journey. In the process, we started from 1 Lego library to 50 now across Ghana. We are in 11 out of the 16 regions, and we have 1 spot in Kenya. And as you join us today on one of our elements, which is the EduChamps community, particularly for people who are championing our work but are not necessarily in sports communities, we hope that discussion will be a fruitful one. And I'll move on to introduce our wonderful guests we have today, starting with Hakeem. Hakeem is the CEO and co-founder of 1 Million Teacher and 1 Million Teacher in Village. And his initiative, they've been able to train over 75,000 teachers across 20 countries and impacted millions of learners in the process. With his background in business, education, entrepreneurship, he's been able to pioneer sustainable community-driven models that integrates visionary work, and he was able to be a finalist of the 2024 African Education Medal, 2025 Influential Leader as well. Maybe if we can, by way of emoji, welcome Mr. Hakeem, that would be wonderful. And I'm moving on to our next panelist, who is our very own chair of trustees, Professor Gloria Agyemang. She is actually an emeritus professor and the very first Black woman to lead a business school in the UK. And she has been able to do a lot of work ranging from different areas of research And again, she has been a trustee for over the last 4 years. Welcome, Professor Gloria. We are great to have you. And I'm moving on to Maggie, Maggie MacDonnell. I hope I said your name right. She is a winner of the 2017 Global Teacher Prize. Incredible. And her work has been within remote Canadian communities where she used physical activities and community-focused approach to combat high rates of youth suicide and improve chances. And of course, she's the Varkey Foundation Global Teacher Prize, also known as the Nobel Prize of Education, which is worth $1 million award. Welcome. We are so great to have you here. I'm moving on to Nicholas. Nicholas is a policy and advocacy expert with experience leading international projects across education, technology, and human rights. He has convened global summits with top policy makers, led delegations, engaging presidents and prime ministers, overseen over 20 countries in campaigns. And he's a researcher, an analytic in education and humanitarian issue. Again, welcome on board, Mr. Nicholas. Moving on to our very own John Kofi. He's a catalyst of EduSpots. So he's currently in one of the local communities. He's a sport leader and currently the assistant head teacher of Agbledomi RC DA Business School. I have to say that shout out to John because this promotion came this year and he's been working with us as a catalyst over the last 4 to 5 years. And we're happy to have you on board as well. I'm moving on to our very own CEO, Cat Davison, who might not need introduction, but yet again, I'm going to do it. She has over 12 years of classroom teaching experience. She was also a finalist of the Global Teacher Prize in 2021 and currently a 2025 UNESCO Fellow. Thank you all for making it, and I'm sure it's going to be an amazing session. So let's get into it.
Thank you so much, Gertrude, for an incredible welcome to this talk. And I feel very privileged myself to be among such incredible education, whether educationists, whether education advocates, whether you're education NGO leaders. I'm very excited to have all of you with us today. So I think that John might have some challenges with his network. So if John pops up in the middle, we'll shortly welcome him into this call. So I'd love us to start today with just a reflection from you, maybe in 1 minute. We'll go to each panelist in turn to explore why you feel that the teaching profession is an important one for you and your work to dedicate time to. So I know that you all intersect with teachers in different ways. Some of you have been teachers, some of you advocate for teachers, some of you lead with teachers. And I just would love to know why teaching? Why have you dedicated so much of your life to supporting, working with, or even being a teacher? And I'm going to start with you, Nicholas.
Hey, Kat, thank you. Can you guys hear me okay?
Perfect, yeah.
Perfect. Okay, great. Sometimes I just ramble on and realize nobody can say anything. Well, look, hi. So I'm Nicholas from the Varkey Foundation. Our foundation exists to build the status of teachers around the world. We believe that everyone deserves a good teacher, and teachers are the bedrock of education. They are 9 out of every $10 spent in education around the world. Education simply cannot exist without them, and we exist to champion teachers around the world and to tell their stories and to shine a spotlight on the incredible difference that teachers make around the world.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Nicholas. So straight from your work championing teachers to Maggie, who I know has worked with the Varkey Foundation.
Yeah, when I think of teaching, I'll actually reference Sonny Varkey, my favorite education philanthropist, who once said, no matter the question, education is the answer. And that quote really sticks with me and hits me hard. And I think teachers just get to be in incredible positions through our profession, connecting with young people. I basically stumbled into my role as a teacher, my formal role as a teacher, but I don't know how to stumble out of it because it's become so human and so powerful and so connected. Like, I literally, in the community that I work in, which is affected by suicide, um, in fact, we had 3 suicides in the last 2 weeks. So it's a very dramatic place, a very emotional time. So in some ways, I'm literally at the funerals of young people, and then 2 weeks later, I'm holding the baby of one of my students. So I find my role as a teacher in the context where I work at is so connected. You're really in people's lives, like you're in their humanity. And for my personality type, I just uh, really enjoy that humanity for all its ups and downs. I do not enjoy the suicides, I should say, but to know that in this role you can be so deeply connected to people, that people want you to hold their babies, that people want you, to be there when their kids die, and to hug their parents and share that time and space with them. It's like a very privileged position in terms of like the emotions that you get exposed to or connected to. So, yeah, that's why I stumbled into teaching and can't stumble out.
Thank you for sharing, Maggie, and love that expression of being in humanity with people. Gloria, I know this is something you definitely are always in humanity with people in different ways, and you bring a higher education perspective to this discussion.
That's true, Kat. I bring higher education. I've been lecturing in universities for about 40 years, but in my last 7 years or so, I was the dean when I spent most of my time developing colleagues, developing lecturers. And somebody asked me why I do that job. And I said, well, education is about development, it's about people development. So we have to spend time developing our teachers, because our teachers are the ones who are going to develop the next generation. Without teachers, without education, nothing progresses in the world. And I think, and that's what I like about being in the classroom, about being with teachers, knowing that they're holding our humanity in their hands in various ways, as Maggie has explained, and they're taking us all forwards. Everybody remembers a good teacher, so our aim should be to make everybody a good teacher, because that's what's going to help us as a society, as a world, move forward.
Thanks, Gloria. And I'm going to come back to that very question shortly about what makes a good teacher, which is, I find fascinating in today's changing world. Hakeem, 1 million teachers. That's, yeah, a very large group of people to aim to be working with. What led you into supporting teachers?
Well, Kat, thank you very much. I mean, there are lots of amazing folk here. I heard Nicholas talking about the work at the Varkey Foundation, and Maggie and I, we've been friends since a very long time, since somebody introduced us. So, but mine is deeply personal. We were looking for a day care for my daughter, and we just didn't find any that we liked. And somehow we ended up saying, we're going to start a daycare. And then the parents said, well, these kids are progressing. Why don't you start a preschool? And then we started a preschool. And then they said, oh, we don't want our kids to go elsewhere because you started with this standard. Why don't you start a primary school? So that's kind of how we got sucked in. And I'm working, progressively like that, from, daycare givers to actual teachers, and seeing all of the problem. I'm from Nigeria. And this is where I like to describe as the ground zero of most of the human development issues that we have in the world. And I saw it firsthand. And I felt like if we could crack this code, it will be with teachers, because teachers are multipliers. I mean, the effect of one teacher, I don't know how verified the research is. It's like throughout their career, the teacher impacts about 3,000 or more students. But even if it's just one student, that's really a lot, and it's a lot of leverage. And I felt that whatever I want to focus on in my future, let it be worth all of the effort. Let me get the most bang for my buck. That's really why we signed up to this mission.
Thanks, Hakeem, and we'll be coming back to some of the challenges that I'm sure it'll be important to touch on in more depth. But I'm determined not to start the talk with the challenges of the world, given that there can be so many, and there can be also some incredible there can be incredible positive examples going on that I'd like to first dive into spotlights on incredible teachers that you've actually come across in your lives. So I want to kind of explore the over question of what makes a teacher a great teacher in today's world. And I just wonder if any of you would like to share your own personal example of someone who either impacted your life or someone who you've come across who you believe is a truly extraordinary teacher. Obviously not one of the brilliant ones in this room, but just to really, I'm trying to really ground the discussion and the daily lives of teachers.
I'll start then, Kat. Is that okay?
Yeah, just
Well,
jump in, keep it free flowing.
I want to talk about my English teacher. My English teacher when I was a young girl. I mean, I was born in Ghana. My parents took me, we went to the UK at age 5. And of course, I didn't speak any English when I started school. But I had this teacher who take time to explain things to me, and she would draw things. She used drawing, and she would clap, and then she would encourage me. I mean, I remember that. I remember her very vividly as a 5-year-old, somebody that I could depend upon, somebody who could bring me out, and somebody who could uh, get me to be part of the group, knowing how vulnerable I was because I didn't have any English. I didn't have any English. And she brought my English up a lot. So I think it's my first teacher in primary school.
Amazing example. Yeah, centering belonging and knowing your individual needs that led towards that is key. Anyone else got a great teacher example?
I'll share something that maybe in some ways seemed quite simple to me, but I think was actually like really meaningful. It was my phys ed teacher growing up, and I lived in a really rural area, went to a rural isolated school, so we didn't have a lot of the same like amenities or resources that like kids in or programming that kids in like urban centers did. And the summer was approaching, and to me that was sadness because we were going to lose this gathering space of the school where we all came together. And so I approached my phys ed teacher and I said, like, could we, and I didn't know I was asking an adult to give all this time, but I was like, could we like have a recreation program every Thursday, in the afternoon for kids this summer so that we can all come together? And he immediately just said, yes, and you're going to help me do it. And so every Thursday at 4 or 2 or whatever it was, we all came together. All the kids would come, we'd play soccer or, football, flag football, tag, whatever it was. At that moment, I was his like trainee, setting up the space, the equipment, welcoming kids, getting the word out, all of that type of stuff. But I had no clue now as an adult that I had asked him to give me like every Thursday of his vacation, which he just gave without hesitation, leaving his own family or dragging his own kids along or figuring things out like that. But what he sparked in me was just this idea that, you can actually make a difference in your community in a small way. Literally, Thursdays from 4 to 7 p.m., we can open up the soccer field, get the equipment, and welcome kids together. And now they have a welcoming, safe space to be, for this amount of time. But it was something when I was in the moment, I just took it for granted. But now when I think back about that was just one example, but I think he gave what felt like every day of his life, for youth in our community. And he modeled that for us so that I just kind of walked into that assuming that's what a teacher does. You even when the bell rings and supposedly the students go home or the formal day ends, it actually just then turns into all this additional extracurricular type of programming that often champion teachers are holding together. And ideally bringing up young people to then also take over that torch per se, so it was small but big.
Yeah, and I definitely resonate with that example. To share one of my own that's similar to yours, Maggie. I remember being a very keen footballer as a kid, probably not the most talented, but in my primary school at the time, I don't think girls had any opportunities to do formal sport, but there was a boys' football team. And I just remember him observing that it was called Mr. Snell. If he's out there, he always observed that I just was drawn to football. He made sure that I could fully participate in football wherever and whenever it happened. But also, I think wanted to protect me at the risks of the football pitch, which he saw as quite a young girl might need some support. But I just always remember the day when he produced me with a pair of football studs and said, "No, I really want you to join." Obviously, I know that maybe speaks to itself in the gender changes that we've gone through in the last decade, and that now I reflect on that and think, well, why wasn't there a football team for girls? But I saw him in that moment, I think, as championing my gender-based rights, and as you said, Maggie, just giving his time far beyond the classroom in ways that we didn't at all understand as kids. So coming to some of the challenges in today's world. So I'm aware, even giving that example, the world is so fast changing in all kinds of different ways. And I think sometimes it can feel that the teaching profession and the role of a teacher, in a classroom with books or chalkboard or whiteboard, the format has stayed pretty similar across a long journey. But what are some of the challenges, before we come to some of the responses and come to Hakeem on this one, that you face, or that teachers face in your particular context in today's very specific kind of social economic situation?
Thanks, Kat. It's hard to tell people, people who don't have this context, the nature of the environment that we work in. We specifically target teachers in the most under-resourced communities. And we work with teachers, some whose take-home pay, if they get it in a month, is less than $20. I mean, that's the reality. So that the biggest challenge for us is really the scarcity and the system. You understand? The scarcity of the tools, the scarcity of infrastructure that they even need. And then even more painful is the respect. Everybody mouths how important teachers are, but very few. There are within families, even, you hear somebody telling the child that, it's almost like you say you're a teacher, you're signing a pact with poverty. It's like the last thing anybody thinks about. Imagine, even like maybe you're my dad and I don't have a job and I'm searching for a job, and then you approach your friend that, please, my son needs a job. I don't care anything, even if it's a teacher. That's how bad it is. Or you're within family, where when conversation are happening within that family, you're the last person that anybody seeks opinion. Why? Because they think that you don't matter. You understand? You have nothing to contribute because you don't have the financial wherewithal to do anything. So that's really the thing that pains me the most. And that's scarcity, the disrespect, a system that has neglected them, and the few who are available standing up every day, they are overworked and they are under-supported. And yeah, it's really painful to see, but we're doing the best that we can to change the narrative.
Thanks, Hakeem. And Nicholas, I know that the Varkey Foundation has done so much work to promote the respect that Hakeem is calling for teachers, and that you've done a lot of work even evaluating the status that teachers have in society. I don't know if you want to speak more to this, and also maybe in the broader international context, the trends that you see of challenges affecting teachers globally today.
Yeah, no, thanks, Kat. I think the two are linked, actually. So we have data from 35 countries around the world that shows that teacher status is incredibly variable. But actually, teacher status is very low compared to other professions. If you take, like we did, 35,000 people and ask them to rank 14 professions in terms of respect, from doctors and engineers to social media managers to classroom teachers, we tend to find that classroom teachers are ranked near to last on that table. We also find that gender plays a fairly significant role in how people tend to think of teachers. And I think that's a serious issue, because it means that teachers are seen as having very little agency. they're seen as not being that important and they're seen as replaceable. And I think that links to the second part of your question, which is about the issues facing the teaching profession. And I think there are serious issues. I mean, all around the world, teaching is an incredibly variable profession. We see that the Varkey Foundation, what it takes to be a good teacher in the Canadian Arctic, where Maggie won her Global Teacher Prize, versus Nakuru in Kenya, where we have another Global Teacher Prize winner, versus the Bronx, versus the Australian Outback. All of those require very different skill sets. But the challenges are increasingly the same, principally among them cuts to education. So education has fallen behind in terms of overall funding, which means in very practical terms, teachers are paying out of their own pockets for stuff for their students. Teachers are having to go above and beyond. Some teachers are having to work like 2 or more jobs just to kind of keep their heads above water. But I think it also informs this lack of respect and appreciation for what teachers do means that teachers are seen as increasingly replaceable, which is what you're seeing at the moment with the rise of AI agents in education. Now, to be clear, I'm not an AI doomer. I think it has enormous potential for education systems and improving education and learning. But I have noticed that in some places, people are talking about teachers as something that can be simply replaced or augmented by AI or other learning technology. And I think the major warning from history is that this is simply not possible. Education is a social process. It relies on fundamentally having a wonderful teacher in front of kids. And the more support and love you give to that teacher, the better they're going to be able to do that job. And if they don't have the respect, which Hakeem was talking about, then it makes their job very difficult indeed.
Thanks, Nicholas. And Gloria, maybe turning to the higher education teachers, as maybe when we typically talk of teachers, maybe some people think more of secondary and primary. But I know that there's, huge impact made also by university teachers, professors, lecturers such as yourself. What are some of the challenges you've seen in the higher education world in today's world?
It's very similar to what Nicholas has been talking about, and also in terms of what Hakeem has been talking about. In universities, there is a divide. There shouldn't be. There's a divide between the research, which is of knowledge creation, and teaching, which is knowledge dissemination. And over time, the knowledge creation value has gone up, so the research that you do is valued more than the teaching that you do. And the sad thing is that the teaching pays for the research. If we don't have students and we don't have teachers, there's no money to finance the research, but it is the research that is valued, which means that often, especially in the elite universities, not everybody, so this is a general statement, you tend to find um, the better teachers, will be pushed out of the classroom into the research area. The research people will be promoted, and again, as Hakeem and Nicholas have said, teaching is being downgraded. I mean, the UK government is trying to change all of that, especially in universities. They have something called the Teaching Excellence Framework, in which they assess teaching within universities. And they have a gold standard and they have a bronze standard, etc. But even within universities, and it's linked with funding. If you have a gold standard, of course, of teaching, then you get more money. But a lot of universities are happy to coast along and achieve the bronze, because they're balancing the teaching and the research, and the research always seems to have more interest, especially amongst the academics. The academics are promoted according to their research. They're not promoted according to their teaching. So even though government policy is trying to move that away, it is ingrown in the system whereby research is valued more than teaching. And the other thing, which is similar to secondary schools, primary schools is the volume of work doesn't stop. University teachers are expected to not just know their subject discipline, but they're also expected to be responsible for the students' social activities, work activities. It's a growing list of things that they want teachers to achieve. And that's very similar in schools, I think, whereby you put a lot of pressure on the classroom teacher such that achieving all of it becomes virtually impossible. So very similar to schools.
Thanks, Gloria. It's so interesting how the same themes sort of arise, but in different shapes and sizes and different levels of education. So I'm really curious to know, given all the challenges that have been highlighted, when we think about the economic situations of teachers, the resilience that teachers might need, when we think about some of the daily challenges in supporting students who are facing extremely difficult circumstances, when we think about the perception some people have of teachers, when we think about what Gloria said in terms of the focus given to quality teaching and all the demands of preparing lessons, marking resources, and similar, that teachers are on I definitely remember myself that kind of never-ending sort of treadmill you're on, where you're constantly preparing lessons, being in the classroom, then returning home to mark the lessons with very little breathing space in between. What do you think it takes to be an exceptional educator in today's world? And I'm using the word educator as well, because I want to broaden the discussion from just the classroom, because I think and this maybe we can develop further if it's of interest to the room, but I think there's a lot of learning that happens in informal spaces that isn't also reflected in our view of teachers and education. So when we think of education in that broader context, with all the changes, including AI and digital tools and similar that Nicholas has touched upon, what do you think makes an exceptional educator? Hakeem, I know that you have certain measures within your system of 1 million teachers that I was very inspired by and motivated by when I heard you talk, and I'd love to hear your view on this topic.
Yeah, thanks, Kat. So, I mean, there's something we talk about a lot, and to our teachers is that they have only one role, just one. I mean, it's nuanced, right? But one thing, and that is to connect the students to their dreams. That's it. Being able to light that fire, and at the heart of that is really emotional intelligence. That having emotional skills, But if we looked at some other ones, particularly in the chaos, in a good way, of AI and all of the productivity tools that are, that proliferate our environment, it's the ability to adapt to situation, and then that curiosity to learn, because I mean, almost everything is in a state of flux right now. So, I think that would be it. Students, it's the same with everybody, right? People don't care what you know; they care that you care. If students see me as approachable, that I see them as human beings, at that one-on-one level, then I think most other things are easy. And I think that's really the most important skill. And then the other two that I talked about, which is the ability to adapt to, the rapidly changing scenario, and then the curiosity to unlearn and relearn and to keep learning. I think that will be it for me.
And do you think that empathy, that emotional intelligence, how to really make children, as Gloria said from her experience, make you feel understood and a sense of belonging, do you think that can be taught, or do you think that that's something that people either have or they don't have?
I think anything can be taught. Honestly, I mean, some people obviously are starting from a particular pedestal. I mean, some gifts are inborn, but I think these are taught, just like leadership. It can be taught, and most of it has to do with even like being able to read the room. You understand moods, situational awareness, and all of those. They can be taught. They can be enhanced. Some people start from a very high base, and then some are just. You really have little of it, but they can be taught.
Great. And Maggie, I'm sure that you would have put high in emotional intelligence and working in an empathetic with students at the top of your list. But is there anything else that when you think of, what our kind of dream educator is in today's world, what else would you add?
To me, like the first thing you need to do and that you need to just keep coming back to is knowing how to connect. And there is a lot of like, yeah, relationship or emotional intelligence involved in that. But I'll say, like, I don't teach math, I don't teach language arts, I don't teach political science, I teach kids. And so once I can connect to that kid, then we're going to take a journey together. Sometimes they're going to be leading, sometimes I'm going to be leading. And then, like, a highly gifted teacher is also then connecting with the community as well. So I think great teachers are like relationship builders, or they build bridges of relationships. But once teachers know how to connect, so much is possible. But if you're in my context, and again, perhaps this is just specific to my context where I work with like kids who've had literally a colonial and genocidal experience with the education system. So they're so um, hesitant to connect, right? So if I was a content master, it wouldn't matter because if I don't have the ability to connect first and then share, I can't share. They're going to have their walls up. So in my context, yeah, connection is where it all starts, and you just keep going back at it, building it, building that connection stronger, deeper, and then it almost becomes like a multiplier effect for you in terms of other kids telling other kids to trust you or telling the community to trust you, and then your projects tend to, yeah, grow exponentially.
Sorry, I'm just checking to see. I think John just briefly joined the discussion and has left again. So I was really keen for you to hear directly from one of EduSpots catalysts. So on the theme of connection, I think that that's something that sometimes people assume is easy to achieve as a teacher. And I think sometimes as well, people assume that maybe every education environment allows and is built for that sense of connection. Gloria, I wonder if you could speak a bit to how teachers moving from this can create really safe learning environments where every student does feel like their voice, that they're able to say things, whether they agree with a teacher, disagree, or whether they can express their needs. As I think this is something that I feel fortunate that I did have a school environment where that was the culture, where I did feel able to have that sense of student voice and was able to put forward my own ideas and build projects of my own and similar. But that's not the case in every culture, and maybe not every school would agree that that needs to be key. And just keen for your thoughts on this, seeing as everyone here seems to think this connection is intrinsic to success for education.
I mean, at the spots, we talk about ignite. We talk about ignite. And I think one of the things that teachers, all teachers, even the bad teachers, if they're anything like that, try to do is to ignite curiosity, you know. And that's something that we all try to work at. I mean, I've retired now. I've retired, and one of the reasons why I retired was I found myself struggling to ignite curiosity amongst the younger people. There's so much noise around, and and especially in universities, previous schooling experience impacts on how they engage. For example, I mean, postgraduate courses in UK, many Chinese students, and the Chinese culture has been in the classroom that the teacher knows all, the student is there to listen and to imbibe the pearls of wisdom coming from the lecturer. And that's really goes against what traditionally we're trying to do in universities. We're trying to get to ignite the curiosity. We're trying to have a debate. We're trying to get them to question and to even say the wrong answers. Because if they say the wrong answers to the questions, then we can unpack and all learn from it. But it's not all cultures take that approach, And so if you're in a classroom with people from mixed backgrounds and a mixed previous education experience, it's really very difficult to achieve. One of the tricks I used to use in the classroom was to tell students that, look, you come into the classroom and you will have to say something before you leave the classroom. So I would go around the class and make sure that everybody said something. And I shared with the class that you're not allowed to laugh. You're not allowed to pull faces and give the impression that this person has given a silly answer. Because the sillier the answer, the more we can all engage in it and study together. So it's ignition, uh, and getting curious people to be curious. And then, of course, the other thing we haven't talked about is trying to develop confidence in our students so that they can ask questions and they can debate. And that's why teaching is not an easy job. It's not an easy job. That's why teachers need more respect and higher salaries, etc. The challenges that they're faced with, because you need to use a variety of tools, bearing in mind that you have a mixed group, different abilities, different language skills, all these things, and yet you want each person to thrive. Sometimes it's useful, and I'm glad Maggie talked about the social bit that they did in her that she introduced into her school, the holiday activities, etc. Because all that also adds to the developing of confidence amongst children. My last point is the importance of getting students, children to see that we are human. We are human. So the business of shouting down people and not giving of yourself to students, I think that's the sort of thing that dampers educational experience for some kids. I'll leave it at that because you can say so many things.
Yeah.
But each teacher, I think, has their style. And each teacher has a toolbox of things that they do. And Hakeem is right. They can learn them, things can be taught.
I love that, the kind of toolkit that every educator has to take in and adapt to different students and situations. And I also love what you said there, Gloria, about the kind of underlying culture of the classroom needing to be something that's kind of worked on and established. So I've recently realized, and I'm about to hopefully shift this paradigm in this session, that we're all kind of in this paradigm of education that comes from history, probably, yes, it's the way societies were run, that there's one person at the front with the knowledge giving it to others. And I personally believe that as much as possible that we can make spaces and classrooms and situations more participatory, that everybody's well-being and input in building whatever they want to create together has that greater sense of autonomy. And I realize even in this session, just for personal reflection, that it's time for us to open the discussions up to the room. And in EduSpots, typically we have a lot of interaction. So just a big thank you to the room again for everyone who's here. And please do drop your questions into the chat. If there's a specific person you'd like to ask your question to, please write the name so I can direct the questions accordingly. So I think there's an important underlying theme to this discussion around salaries for teachers. And William is asking, how can we do something about improving salaries for teachers? Nicholas, I'm going to come to you with how, I know in every country the situation is different, but what can be done to raise the economic conditions of teachers?
I think it comes back to respect. I think that's the kind of fundamental force in education that everybody talks about. It's very hard to measure, but it fundamentally affects every aspect of teaching life. I think if you build people's respect for teachers, you will build policymakers' respect for teachers. And I think that will enormously help discussions around improving the living wage for teachers. We know that paying teachers the right amount of money to do their job, which is like the hardest job in the world, makes a huge difference to learning outcomes. It's pretty simple. And we at the Varkey Foundation are exploring research on the economic returns of teachers, which is a very big way of saying that teachers make an enormous difference to the economic life of your country. If you want your country to thrive, you need to invest in teachers because they are teaching the next generation. So I think it comes back to building the status of teachers.
Great. And Hakeem, sort of on a similar theme, I know that you picked this out as one of the key challenges. And I guess I don't know enough about 1 million teachers. I need to really have a detailed presentation for you. But I
Right.
understand that you do a lot of work to do exactly that from a different perspective in
Yeah.
terms of the different journeys teachers pass through and how they feel valued, which is a big thing in EduSpots, where for context for everyone, as Gertrude explained, EduSpots is a network of 400 voluntary catalysts, maybe 70% of whom are teachers. And there's a big focus on kind of making teachers feel like, I won't use the word celebrity, but making them feel like they're important, that they're adding value to their community,
Yeah.
and creating those sort of communication routes for other people to see the impact that they're making. So how do you respond to this in your organization? Oh, just going to mute that person.
Yeah.
Sorry,
Okay.
Alan.
Yeah. Thank you, Kat. So I do have a few thoughts, but just before that, if you will permit me, and while we're talking about connectedness and all of that, I mean, the word that just jumped into my head is psychological safety in the classroom. And beyond the classroom even, but when we're in a place where people know that they have permission to express themselves, and it's safe to do that. I think the teachers have a responsibility to create that kind of atmosphere in the classroom. Then it's easy to connect to them. But that being said, I wrote an op-ed just last week about teachers being the real economic architect, and it's true. And Nicola just alluded to that. So that's something that also jumped at me right away. And we haven't done the numbers. I don't know if 1 million teacher has the resources to do that kind of analysis, but we do know, I mean, anecdotally, that it's show me the level of your society, your economy. I'll show you the state of the education of that society. Show me the state of your education, and I show you how teachers are treated. I mean, this is highly, highly correlated, and I think there is so many research that supports it. But in our case, apart from, we don't even say we train teachers, we say we empower teachers, because the training component of it is actually the first phase. And then putting them in professional learning communities where they actually see what others are doing, model good behavior, encourage themselves, provide that psychosocial support for one another. And we have literally cells all over the place popping up, and they do in-person, they do virtual meets and all of that. But a key part of it is also advocacy, and then teaching them to be assertive. But how can you be assertive when you don't even have respect, where you've learned to be helpless? So those are some of the things that we've kind of embedded into our program. And when we have this session, that you are going to raise your voice, you are going to demand it, and you yourself are going to strive for excellence. You need to have that sense of self-efficacy, that you matter, that you can make a difference, and that you deserve a say at the table. So it's all of that. I just talked about at the beginning, while we were chatting before the event, about we convening the largest gathering of teachers, and there's a communique. Very detailed community about how we go to National Assembly, how we demand policy change. So as we get stronger as organizations, as individuals, we're demanding a seat at the table where this conversation, we keep it in the front burner so that people's mindset will be changed.
Wow. Yeah, there's so many different elements of what you just said that we could expand on. I think I'm so curious to learn more, Hakeem, about what you do in terms of peer-to-peer. That your kind of shift away from your role as an organization being a trainer towards creating peer-to-peer learning spaces. As I think one of the things teachers need more than anything is community. And it's sort of ironic, isn't it, that a teacher's life, I remember feeling very lonely in a classroom day to day, despite being constantly surrounded by people. And then when you get home, you're so exhausted from the day's activities that you don't really have any energy for kind of interaction with other humans. So you can end up becoming very isolated, despite probably being one of the most socially rooted professions. That's something I'm sure we could speak much more to. We have some questions I want to make sure that get answered. Maggie, you're being put in the hot seat for some brilliant teaching questions. So Zainab is wondering, what practical examples can we use to assess learners' understanding of a topic instead of exams? So I guess the question here is sort of moving away from more formalized testing of students. How else can we gain an understanding of how and what students are learning?
What definitely worked a lot in my classroom, and I did teach like an alternative lifestyles classroom, but I would get my students to demonstrate by teaching another kid or showing me that they could share what they learned with a peer or with like a younger group. And I think that's like a really fun way to do it. And then it also ideally brings it into like action or having meaning. Sometimes, writing stuff down on exams is purely performative for administrative reasons, versus like creating experiences where knowledge is rooted in a place or blooms or has an action and then has a meaning and then it just grows and it's really fun to do it that way. So if there are ways you can do that within your classroom or that environment, yeah, try to get your students to show that they can teach another kid it, or to share it with a younger student, for example.
I love that. Making sure it's purposeful, adding value in the process through who kind of benefits from that ripple of learning in different ways. I've also got Love who's asking another difficult question. Please, how can a teacher deal with the volume of subjects to teach in a class? Sometimes 4 to 5 a day. I think this is particularly for primary school teachers. I don't know who wants to jump in on this one. Any thoughts on how a teacher can balance teaching so many different topics in a day? It's a difficult question. Maggie, back to you.
Um, I'll try to jump in just from like the research I've seen or things I've seen in some schools, and I don't know if this is already coming from your context or not, but they'll call them like professional communities, professional learning communities. So our like secondary 3, 4, 5 teachers were always overwhelmed, and so luckily our school leadership gave them time during their day to or their week to come together for maybe 2 hours where they would share resources, share lesson plans, share exam testing, et cetera, et cetera. So if you could find the time to come together in a small group of people also teaching similar subjects or in that same area, then if you could find enough time to plant some seeds together, then usually they can grow and they can help save you time later and give you a more quality output in your classroom. But that depends if you can find the time to do that. But yeah, working together usually makes a big difference. And as you mentioned, Kat, it's so ironic that schools, which are just bustling full of people, often teachers are working in what we call silos, just in their own class by themselves. So I think anytime you can build community, mini communities, bring teachers together for an hour every Monday morning, to take on a task such as that, sometimes it can really help them in the long run. But ideally, a policy change where teachers had more time to lesson plan would be the real solution.
Yeah.
But we seem to need Hakeem to empower us more so that we can take on these larger policy issues. But until then, we can strategize with our own colleagues.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it, how teaching can be quite uncollaborative. And, we all know the teacher. I'm sure I've been one at times who's developed my own beautiful resources and becomes very protective of what's been created. And whilst it's important for, I think, every teacher to have resources that they have ownership of to an extent, because every teacher has their own style, I think there's so much that could be done for teachers to work together and have a more collaborative mindset. Zainab's question also relates to how we can make assessment more inclusive instead of ranking or comparing learners. And I'm really curious just to expand this to a question of how can we make assessment more team orientated rather than individualistic, as I think learners quickly learn that they have to pass certain metrics to get something for themselves, and I often wonder what they take into society in terms of an individualistic approach to life rather than team orientated. Nicholas, I wonder if you have the answer to this complex question.
I think, look, I want to say two things. So one is absolutely we need to figure out how to make assessment more inclusive. And I really love the idea of making kind of learning assessment more collaborative and figuring out what people learn in groups rather than individuals. I'm all on board for that. What I will say is, and to play devil's advocate, and please don't kick me off the call, assessment is incredibly important. It's really important to know what kids know. And it shouldn't be done in a way that makes kids feel bad. And I think maybe that's what, not to pass the questions, but that's kind of what people are asking is like, how can we test in a way that doesn't make kids feel like they failed. And I remember like going through education and being tested and feeling like incredibly disempowered and feeling like a failure over and over again. And I see my kids going through the education system and they're probably feeling the same. So I think that's the way, that's for me, that's the question we need to address, which is how can we make sure kids are actually learning stuff while not singling them out and making them feel like failures? And perhaps part of the way is to build the resilience around testing and to understand that testing is important, but it doesn't mean that you're a failure if you haven't done as well, and that some people will do better and some people will do worse. It's an incredibly controversial subject, and everyone on this call will have very, very strong opinions about it. But we can't get around the fact that we do need to understand at some level, like how kids are doing and how kids are doing on an individual level in relation to each other. That's to get back to the hard question at the beginning of this panel, like what do teachers need to be able to succeed? One of the key things they need to be able to succeed, and we've seen this time and time again, is to like know how their kids are doing, like in relation to each other. It can be incredibly empowering, but we have to find a way to do it in a way that doesn't feel punitive or punishes children. And I think that's probably the way to do it. But I really love to come back to the first point. I really love the idea of figuring out how to do it collaboratively, to figure out how kids learn in units and to test the social processes which empower education.
Great. I think we could have a long discussion on assessment, which we sadly don't have time for. But I think it comes back often to the particular culture that's created in a school classroom or a community, and how ultimately assessment is used for a particular purpose. But I do personally wonder how much time is dedicated to measuring certain skills that are important in students' life, but maybe not, those skills coming back to what we were all saying at the start around emotional intelligence, empathy, how you work in a team, critical thinking, and all those things, whether they're forefronted in assessment structures in different ways. So we're nearing the end of the call, and I'd love you each to just in one sentence, as this is World Teachers Day, it's a celebration of teachers for the incredible work that teachers across the world are doing day in, day out. I know there are lots of teachers on this call, and I'd love you just in one sentence to maybe just say one thing to those teachers out there in celebration of everything they do for learners. Gloria, coming to you first.
I think as teachers, remember that you're in a very powerful position. Our children's are in your hands and in your care. And in that respect, I think teaching is a vocation. It is a vocation. You do want to make your living out of it, but I think you always have to remember that we have put people in your care to for their development. And as much as it's difficult to forget all the challenges, that's your value. Your value is in having this tree that you're going to water, that you see blossom. And I think you must always bear that in mind.
Thanks, Gloria. Hakeem.
Um, I think, I mean, I don't know any other profession that helps mold character and build multiple skill sets, adaptable skill sets as teaching. And I think my advice will be for teachers, whereas you're doing a noble work, recognize that ultimately these are skill sets that you gain as you go along in your career that can be adapted to so many other situations for you to be successful. So I would say that just keep doing what you're doing, keep stepping up, keep improving. Somehow, some way the universe aligns in your favor at the end of the day for all of your hard work. So just to wish you happy Teachers Day.
Thanks, Hakeem. Maggie.
Yeah, to credit Hakeem again at the start, he talked about teachers being multipliers, and I think that's so true. In my case, honestly, I didn't know the impact I was having on my students, and I want teachers to know that it took my students nominating me for this prize and telling me that I had literally saved their lives from a suicide plan. And I had no clue I had done that. I was just being their friend, their teacher, their coach, a member in their community and working with them. And so sometimes I think teachers, you don't even know the effect that you're having, but trust me, it matters a lot, and it's beyond your dreams, the effect that you're having. So please stay in this profession. I know it's so tough, especially in the context where folks are surviving off of very meager salaries, and I have a tremendous amount of empathy in that context. So yeah, teachers matter. You matter so much. Sometimes you're planting seeds and you're not always there to smell the flowers, but trust me, the flowers are blooming at some point. So thanks to teachers, big time.
Thanks, Maggie. You're seeing the emoji reactions in this room. Nicholas, one last sentence for teachers.
Thank you for everything you do. And I know from speaking to so many teachers around the world, teaching is an incredibly lonely profession sometimes, but you are not alone. There is an extraordinary community of educators around the world. And one of the things that I love about working with teachers is they're so generous with their time and they love meeting other teachers. So if you ever do feel that you want to speak to other teachers, you're looking for a new perspective, you're looking for support, for solidarity, please reach out to me, to Hakeem, to anyone else on this call, and we would love just to connect you and have a conversation.
Amazing. Thank you so much, everyone, for your time. I'm going to hand over at this point to Cynthia, who's got a few closing words. And Cynthia herself has been a teacher for many years. Cynthia, over to you.
Okay, hello everyone. Good evening. I'm Cynthia and I'm the Volta Regional Coordinator at EduSpots. So before we close, I'm going to talk about two exciting initiatives in the EduSpots network. So the first one is the EduSpots Club 100. Now, this is a growing community of individuals or partners who are committing to supporting EduSpots work through regular monthly giving. Now, each contribution you'd be given in the EduSpots 100 Club helps us expand our learning resources, train catalysts, and then just generally supports our sports across Ghana and then beyond. So it's a way for any and everyone, wherever they are in the world, to directly power community-led change. Yes, so that's it, be a donor. The next thing is the EduChamps community, of which you're already benefiting of. So this is an equally special initiative. It's a platform where teachers, catalysts, change makers, we connect, we learn, we celebrate impact, and then we inspire one another through stories and strengthen our collective vision for equitable education. So be it the EduSpots 100 Club or the EduChamps community, if you haven't been, or if you haven't signed on, I should say, to any one of these initiatives, we're extending a warm welcome to you, a hand of invitation. Please join us, sign up for the EduChamps community or the 100 Club, and we'll be happy to have you. Last but not least, we have an online course, which was initially active, but has been defunct for some time now, and it is coming back in full force. And we are exploring intercultural dialogue, looking at global development, and then how we can explore our agency as global citizens. So we'll be relaunching in January, and more details will follow. Just follow us on all socials, and then you would have that. So our next EduChamps Talk will be coming off on Monday, October 11th, and it's on the International Day of the Girl Child. We are hoping that we would have this number more. Come join us just like we have done today. And we have interesting panelists who would lend their voices to the conversation for the day. So follow us on all socials, Instagram, LinkedIn, Facebook, and X, and connect with us in whatever way you can. All right, great. So I would want to round off the session by saying thank you, a big thank you. So on behalf of the entire EduSpots team, or family, I should say, I would want to say a big thank you to all of you for coming online today, joining us for our EduChamps Talk, which has been on global, which has been an insightful session. Yes, I want to first thank our wonderful CEO for leading the session, leading this vision, and continuously reminding us that education can be three things: community-driven, locally led, and then globally connected. We want to thank you so much for this. And to our incredible panelists, Mr. Hakeem Subair, Prof. Gloria Agyemang, and Miss Maggie MacDonnell, and then Mr. Nicolas Piachaud. I hope I got the names right. Thank you for lending your presence and your voices once again to the conversation. It's been very insightful. It's been very encouraging. It's been very inspiring. And we've learned a lot from your experiences that we can carry home and apply in our various areas of work. So thank you all for coming to today's session. Happy World Teachers Day.